Hello and welcome back to Set to Hike. I've never done a Q&A before, so this should be a little bit of fun. I asked you guys some questions over on Instagram. I got quite a few questions, so I probably won't be able to answer them all today, but we'll give it a good crack. So, got my piece of paper here. What is your top 3 places to go on your bucket list? That number 1 would definitely be America. I had a 3-month holiday booked in America for 2020, and we all know how that ended up. It was so close. I think we were about 2 months out from leaving, and I don't think my life will quite be complete until I get my holiday to America. So that is definitely number 1. Another place that's probably on my bucket list would be Iceland, mainly because of the waterfalls and just to sit in all the geothermal pools. But I also have a best friend that lives in Germany, so I have to go see her one day. But anywhere that's warm is really enticing for me. I do own one of those scratch maps of the world, so I would like to start scratching a few more countries off. Next questions are fairly similar. What got you started in hiking, and how did your passion for the outdoors start? So that would have been because of high school. We used to have a subject called outdoor education. We would do things like skiing, surfing, and hiking, and going kayaking. And so it was because of school that I went on my first ever overnight hike. I think I was 15 years old. And yeah, it just introduced me to this entire world that I thought was pretty cool. My family are not really, well, they're not into hiking and only really into camping if it involves the caravan. But they've always been very supportive of me trying to attempt whatever I'm going to do. What has been your worst hiking experience? That would be the Cape to Cape track in Western Australia. The video is still coming, by the way, but on that hike, it was around day 4, but something happened to the back of my Achilles in both feet. One was worse than the other, and basically each time I would step, I would just get this shooting pain that would go right up the back of my leg. And I don't know if it was because of this sand, like that track really has a lot of sand and I'm not quite used to all the sand walking, or potentially it could have been the distances. Those distances were a lot bigger than what I was used to. I was by myself, so I actually, one night at the campsite, I called a transport service to come get me in the morning and take me to the next campsite. I actually skipped a day and then rested that day. Then I was magically able to finish the rest of the track hiking in my sandals. So there was 2 days left that I hiked in my sandals. And I was only able to do that because there was sand. I think if there was a lot more rocky terrain, sandals would not have been good enough. But thankfully it was flat. That was probably the worst experience. I think physical pain for me is when it gets pretty bad. Filming or editing videos? Definitely editing. When I was about 17, I used to want to be a video editor, and when I was in university, I had a little phase of liking the cameraman, being a cinematographer, but I went back to my roots, and editing is definitely my favorite part about the entire production process. Do you do anything special to prevent dehydration on a hot day of hiking, i.e. use gels? So I'm the kind of person in my normal life, I'm pretty good at drinking water. I was always one of those kids that had a drink bottle with me at all times. My mum would freeze half of my drink bottle and then fill the rest up with water, so I always had icy cold water throughout the day. So in terms of hiking, that sort of translates. I don't really have a problem with keeping my fluids up, but I do notice that for me, having a water bladder is much easier to drink than if I had a water bottle trying to reach around. It's literally right there. You can walk and drink at the same time if you wanted to. So I think having a water bladder is a big one for me. I also use Powerade powder. I just get like a 600ml little like Coke bottle, and it's mainly just to have something different than water. Just that bit of variance is nice. I've only ever used gels once, and I don't know if it was the brand that I got, but it was terrible. Maybe I should give it another go. I guess the other thing that I do is when I get to camp and I unpack my bag, I check the level of my water bladder and just make sure that I am drinking enough. And I always have my bladder next to me when I'm sleeping at nighttime throughout the night, because I feel like that will help for the following day. But yeah, I think just constantly reminding yourself to take sips throughout the day. What do you do for a living? I am currently a freelance video editor. So I went to university and studied film and television in Melbourne, and subsequently I was a full-time video editor for about over 3 years with a production company in Melbourne. When COVID came along, I lost my job because we just completely ran out of work. We weren't able to film anything around people. And so there was sort of that transition period where I was going to try my hand at freelance editing, and that was also going to allow room to work on my YouTube channel. So while I'm currently a freelance video editor, it is my goal to be able to have Set2Hike as my business and earn full-time income through Set2Hike one day. Best way to combat boredom on the trail. I mean, for me, I have another objective of filming the trail, so it's kind of like I'm working, so I don't really have an excuse to be bored because I have to film. When you're not filming and you were just doing a solo hike by yourself for multiple days and you didn't really run into many people, I can see how that would become quite boring or just not as stimulating. So, I mean, for me, other than my filming, I would have a book with me, or I would bring some sort of miniature game, like a mini deck of cards. You can play some solitaire by yourself, but I honestly think the best way to combat boredom would be to have a friend or friends with you on the track. I don't think there's any substitute for some company like that when you're on a trail. Has hiking ever strengthened or weakened your relationship with someone? I think hiking really strips down all the outside influences, and you really see somebody at their core when you are hiking, especially when they are faced with like mental challenges or physical challenges. That's when you really see somebody's true personality, I think. Luckily for me, I don't think that any relationship has been weakened by hiking. If anything, I think it's made it better. I got no horror stories from ruined friendships or anything, so I think it's all been positive. Are you loving NZ? So for those that don't know, I'm currently living in Auckland in New Zealand. I pretty much moved here to hike some of the Great Walks of New Zealand. There is a huge difference between Auckland and the rest of New Zealand. Auckland, I'm not a super big fan of, but as soon as you leave, there's just this difference in the atmosphere, I think. It probably sounds kind of silly, but I mean, I'm seeing some beautiful places that it's definitely worth it. Give me your next top 5 hikes in your basket that is not in Australia or New Zealand. So I haven't really done too much research into hikes in other countries except for America because I knew that I was going to be there. So coincidentally, all the top 5 hikes that I want to do that are not Australia or New Zealand are all in America. So that is Angel's Landing, Half Dome, the Narrows. I hike to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and back out again, and a multi-day hike to Havasupai Falls. Definitely top 5. What is the place you'd love to hike most in the future? So again, just considering the research that I have done, that would be Zion National Park, or just to expand it a bit bigger, make it Utah. I would love to see your latest gear list / video. The most recent video that I've done on my gear would be what to pack for an overnight hike, which was when I was going to do the Great Ocean Walk. So most of that gear I think is still the same except for my pack, but I also have a website now so you can see the list of the gear that I currently use. And when things change up a little bit more, then I might do another gear list video. What is your go-to snack or meal to have on the trail for a full day hike? Chocolate. Definitely chocolate. I'm a terrible sweet tooth person, and I love chocolate and chocolate cake. Chocolate is definitely something that is always with me on every single hike. But aside from that, I think just a warm meal when you get to camp. Doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it's warm. That's always nice. How to deal / pack with a wet tent in the morning. Wet tents are always so sad, especially when you go to bed that night and your tent is nice and dry. But basically, I would get up in the morning and I would shake the outside of the tent just to get rid of that excess water, and then I'd have breakfast, do all my like campy kind of stuff, get ready for the day, and then the tent is the last thing that I would normally pack up. And it's also the first thing that goes into my pack at the bottom. Once I've done all my campy stuff, I will give it another shake, and then sometimes I will have like a microfiber cloth with me, so I would just try and give that a little bit of a wipe, and again just try and get rid of that excess water. And I fold it into the tent bag, and so the tent bag is always going to be dry, and put it into my pack. And then when I arrive at camp for the next night, setting my tent up is the first thing that I do out of everything, and hopefully that gives it a better chance to dry out as well. And the last question is, what has been your favourite hike to date? That would be the Freycinet Peninsula Circuit in Tasmania. I could not believe how beautiful that hike was, and it was just one of those hikes where everything was perfect. There's just lovely people on the trail, the weather was beautiful, and there was the bioluminescent water at nighttime. And that was the first time I'd ever seen that, and that just blew me away. It was so beautiful. So that's been my favourite hike to date. And then for New Zealand, I feel like New Zealand's a little bit of a different category, so for New Zealand it would probably be the Tongariro Northern Circuit. Again, that landscape is just something I've never seen before, the like volcanic landscape. So that's probably an extremely close second. By the time you see this video, my New Zealand hikes will probably be ready for release. So I'm super excited to show you them. I hope that you enjoy them. This year, 2022, is definitely, I'm just really trying to build Set to Hike as a business and keep providing value to the hiking community. If you do have any questions, I would love to do another Q&A, so write them in the comments below and I will compile them again for the next one. So thank you again for watching, and I will see you soon.